All right, well, today I wanted to talk about the cons of being an unattractive man. I'll be using my experiences when I was overweight and balding for many years, as well as the experiences of other unattractive men that I've known. So, what do I mean by unattractive? This could mean a guy who's facially very unattractive, overweight, extremely short, or balding, things that society generally deems unattractive. A lot of the time, it's a combination of these things that makes someone conventionally unattractive. The first con would be frequent rejection. When I was overweight and balding many years ago, I definitely felt the negative effects of rejection. When you're unattractive, the vast majority of women just reject you plain and simple. Most women I approached back then had virtually zero interest in me. I think when you're very unattractive, most women just don't want to be seen even talking to you, especially in high school or college. When you're an unattractive guy, you just feel invisible, and when you do put yourself out there, it's often met with either a harsh rejection, being flat out ignored, or just very standoffish body language with one-word answers. This happened so frequently when I was overweight and balding. I noticed when I lost the weight over many years and got 2 hair transplants, rejection just happens far less, and women are just much more receptive to my approach. To give you a story, I went to a nightclub years back with a buddy of mine from work. He's 5'3", he's balding, he's Haitian, for context. He has a pretty unattractive face. He's got a big nose, very recessed jaw, and he's got gaps in between his teeth. That's kind of like a visual. I saw him try to dance with about 20 women, and unfortunately he got shot down by every single one. You know, he tried a lot of different things. He tried giving them high fives, he tried just walking up and introducing himself, he tried to twirl them around, and yeah, I just saw every single time, they either moved away or they just kind of gave him the hand. And I gave him a lot of credit and respect for trying, but it was just brutal to watch. And I really felt bad for him because I know what that feels like I know what that feels like when I was very overweight and balding and going out there. The second con would be crippling loneliness. So when you're an unattractive man, not getting any attention from women, not getting any matches on dating apps, and getting rejected by women in places like bars and clubs, you definitely start to feel very lonely over time. When I was overweight and balding for many years, I felt this. For a few years, especially my second and third year in college, I sat in my room pretty much every night when I wasn't in class. And I would watch hours and hours of old shows like Lost, Prison Break, especially on the weekends. I didn't want to go out to parties and bars on the weekend, as I just didn't feel like that I would fit in there and fit in those environments due to that negative feedback. You feel like you will never find someone who will like you, as it's hard for someone to have that genuine lust for you when you're an unattractive guy. And I felt that for many years. After a while, you almost feel like no one will ever find you attractive. It really wasn't until improving my appearance that women started being interested in me, and voila, the loneliness feeling went away over time, the more I look smaxed. The next con would be negative perceptions of you from women and men. I'll give you 2 examples when I was at my heaviest. I was sitting with my buddy who knew a good amount of people at the first university I went to. He was very social. He was in a frat. Greek life wasn't that big at this school, but I was sitting with him in the cafeteria when 2 girls that he knew sat down. They were cool with him, but they were very standoffish towards me. I remember trying to join in on the conversation and what they were saying, and my friend obviously was trying to include me, but the one girl just didn't even reply when I asked her a question. It was like I wasn't even there. It was like my mere presence and being very overweight, pale, and balding was just enough to give her that disgusted feeling. And I felt this. Later on that day, my friend told me that he thinks that the girl's really stuck up. And I asked him, obviously I thought so too. And I asked him what makes you say that? And he was like, yeah, man, after you left, she said that you seem really weird and asked me not to bring him around the next time. And it was just crazy because we were sitting in the cafeteria, but I guess he had texted them, while I was with him, to meet up for food. And it was just really odd. But at the time, my confidence was very low, and maybe part of that came through. But the big issue was my appearance. And when your appearance isn't good, people assume negative traits about you. And another time that same year, my other friend, who was like probably the only other person I really hung out with besides my other buddy I had talked to, I guess he was in a conversation with this other guy that I kind of knew at the time. And that guy had told him, he had told this guy that I was transferring to another university. And this university I was transferring to is better than my first university. And he said that the guy said to him, "Oh, I'm like really surprised. Like he looks retarded." And like for context, this guy definitely liked to talk a lot of shit to people. But there was a part of me that really felt that like me being overweight and like having a balding comb over haircut really did make me come off that way. Like I think this guy saying, "Oh, he looks retarded. I'm surprised he looks retarded." This guy was probably like half thinking that, like he probably legitimately thought that, because that's kind of how bad I looked at the time. Bottom line is, when people see you for the first time and you're conventionally unattractive, negative perceptions are created of you, and the halo effect just kind of kicks in. So, but once I lost the weight and took care of my like massively receding hairline, I don't get those negative perceptions placed on me, and frankly, the opposite happens. The next con is that it's harder to make friends when you're unattractive. So during those few years that I was overweight and visibly balding, I only had a few friends at my old university. And ironically enough, I had met those friends during my freshman year when I wasn't super overweight. I wasn't in good shape to any extent, but when you're unattractive, especially in high school and college, most people just don't want to be associated with you. This isn't the case for everyone, but at this age, when people are in high school or college, most people want to be seen as cool. They want to be seen as like in the in crowd. And when you're overweight and balding, like I was, you stand out like a sore thumb, and people just don't want to be seen talking to you or hanging out with you. I think this is especially true for women, young women like in high school and college. I noticed that guys didn't care as much, but women just don't want to be seen by their friends, even talking to a guy that's like deemed unattractive. And it can lower their value in the eyes of other women if they see you talking to them at like a bar or a club or a party. People tend to be very shallow at this age. And like I said, when you're unattractive, women don't want to be seen by their friends as, talking to a guy that's unattractive. I think people just instinctively place negative perceptions on you, and in turn, they don't want to take the time of getting to know you. At least this was my experience. The next con would be bullying. When you're unattractive, you have to deal with more bullying, especially growing up in middle school or high school, especially if you're very short, you have acne, you're overweight, you're balding, or you just have an unattractive face. There was this kid in my school. He was about like 5'1". He had kind of like a squeaky voice. And I just remember people would always mess with this kid. And I was never really in the same class as him, but I remember the one time there was like this trash can in this stairwell. And I remember these two kids just like picked him up, and they like threw him in the trash can, and the trash can like fell over. Because I guess when the kid landed in the trash can, he landed on like the side of it. And then it like the trash can just like toppled over. But it was just crazy. But like honestly, like when you're unattractive, I think especially if you're short or overweight, you just tend to be like the butt of the joke, even in your friend group, or and just in general, you're just going to be dealing with a lot more bullying, a lot more teasing. People are just more likely to mess with you as you're just an easier target. I think bullying typically happens a lot less in college, but you'll still deal with it to an extent when you're unattractive at any point in your life. The next con is that you have to work much harder when you're an unattractive man than you would if you're conventionally attractive. This applies to everything from dating, relationships, and your career. When you're an unattractive man, dating feels impossible, and getting into a relationship feels like moving mountains. When I was conventionally unattractive, dating just felt like impossible, and I had virtually zero success during those years. But I noticed when you improve your appearance, dating and getting into a relationship is just much easier, like sometimes 100 times easier than it was before. And as an unattractive man, you also need to work 10 times harder in your career to kind of prove yourself to the company that you work for. When you go above and beyond for the company, you typically won't be recognized as much for your work as a conventionally attractive person was. And I think this is just subconscious. It's not like your boss or your coworkers are consciously thinking, oh, like this attractive guy is doing such a better job than this unattractive guy. But it's just people are just more likely to reward or show positive reinforcement to someone who's more attractive. I think if you work in a STEM related field, your looks come into play less. But I can say in fields like marketing, finance, real estate, business, like really any other role in the corporate world outside of STEM, being more conventionally attractive just opens up doors. Like when you're attractive, people in the office generally, more people in the office generally want to be your friend more often. You'll typically be invited to more happy hours, and a lot more people would just want to meet up on the weekends. And that'll help you network more, and like that can help you when roles are coming up, and you have more people that will vouch for you. As opposed to when you're unattractive, you just are more likely not to get invited to happy hours, and people may not want to be your friend and get to know you as much. I honestly, I don't even like going to happy hours anymore. I think a lot of times they're just a huge waste of time and money. In turn, because you're not people, people aren't inviting you out to happy hours. They're not wanting to engage with you as much as at work. You don't network with as many people, and you have less people to kind of vouch for you, when you're going for that next role. You can even see this playing out in group projects at work. Like when you're attractive, people tend to like your ideas more. I think there's exceptions to this. If you say something really stupid, but when you're unattractive, people tend to be more, in my experience, more dismissive of your ideas. You could have a really good idea and even articulate it well. But when you're unattractive, I think people in general are just much more skeptical of you. And they don't have that same spark feeling as if an attractive person were saying it. But this isn't a hard and fast rule, just something I've seen in many instances. I've also seen in the corporate world, sometimes in a more attractive person will throw a Halloween party, or they'll throw some sort of gathering outside of work. And because they're more popular, people tend to agree with their ideas more. More people tend to want to work with them. More people kind of talk them up to maybe superiors. Whereas an unattractive person, because they don't have that same status, quote unquote, people just may not want to work with them as much on projects, may not give them praise on those projects, and just in general aren't going to be very supportive of their ideas. I think this isn't talked about as much in the corporate world, but I've seen it in real time play out. The last con that I've experienced is that people generally don't care as much of what you have to say when you're unattractive. When I was unattractive, I noticed that when I had something to say or said something that was insightful or added to the conversation in a meaningful way, I noticed that just people didn't really care as much. There was much less enthusiasm in their voice, and the conversation wouldn't naturally carry forward. They wouldn't ask follow-up questions. This wasn't just women, but guys too. I think people are naturally, instinctively disgusted by people they find unattractive, and genuinely just don't enjoy interacting with them. And you could have the most interesting stories in the world, or you could say the funniest, wittiest line, but if you're unattractive, it's people don't seem to care. It's your joke doesn't stick as well, or people are just much more skeptical of your idea or what you're saying. And obviously this isn't always the case, but I found that when I improved my appearance, when I was telling an interesting story, or I was saying something insightful, could be finance related or politics, whatever, people tend to just listen a lot more closely and tend to ask more follow-up questions, and they have more of a genuine curiosity, Whereas before, they would just have like a dim look in their eyes and would even sometimes be like looking around or even cutting me off while I was telling a story. I even noticed this at like family gatherings in the past when I was conventionally unattractive. They would like, let's just say your aunt would ask how you're doing, but it would be very unenthusiastic. It would be like, how are you doing? And when you replied back, you're like, I'm doing good. And then they're already checked out of that. You look over like while you're saying I'm doing good. And you can tell they're already checked out of that conversation. And they were just asking out of formality. But voila, after improving your appearance, your same aunt will be like, hey, how are you doing? Like there's a difference. Like there's a difference in the pitch, in the delivery of how your aunt is asking that question. That was so crazy. Like, I've always found this fascinating, but even your own family, your own flesh and blood, cares more about how you're doing when you're attractive. That's how primal it gets. It's like people want to make sure you're doing well when they like what they see in front of them. And if anyone has also gone through like a glow up or improve their appearance, you'll definitely be able to attest to this difference. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to hit the notification bell. Feel free to comment down below your experiences of any cons of being an unattractive man. And feel free to subscribe. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care.